So 2071 represents the 100-year mark of the UAE, and the UAE was united in 1971. Our vision is to make become one of the world's leading nation by 2071, and this can be all accomplished by our ecosystem. So Area 2071 is this space, and it's an ecosystem which consists of three main like pillars, we can say, which are private sectors, talents, and government entities. The great part is that we make all those three pillars work all together with no barriers. And due to that, we have some amazing and great programs as the ones we are having here on the screen. So, for example, we have Dubai Future Accelerators, we have Smart Dubai Global Blockchain Challenges, and many more. Area 2071 is known for hosting events and activations, and used to do them physically in our space. Um, but but certainly we're continuing like those events, but virtually. And I'm glad to say that we've hosted almost five or more virtual women Majlis series so far, and they're going great. We're trying to connect and having such great speakers and inspirational ones for our community. So for those who who joined us first time as like Women Majlis sessions, let me introduce you to Women's Majlis. It's launched in March 2019 in line with the celebration of International Women's Day. It's a monthly gathering that brings inspirational speakers to share their insights, their stories, to impact, uh, um, to inspire everyone. And this happens through interviews, panel discussions. Previously, we had a lot of great and amazing speakers. Those are some of them. So we try to have like different women from different fields and different kind of interests. So we have entrepreneurs, we have lawyers, artists, coaches, and authors. Those are some of the other speakers. Um, and the exciting part is that it's always moderated by the Women in Dubai Future Foundation. So using this platform, we try to find the talents in our community by letting our employees moderate the sessions with adding their personal touch. Moderating this session today is Aruba Khalid. She's a senior research analyst in Dubai Future Foundation. And we will be having three great speakers, Dr. Huda, Professor Christina, and Dr. Eva. So now we will be moving to Aruba. So the floor is all yours, and enjoy the session.
Thank you, Noura, for the introduction. I'd like to welcome everybody for joining this session. So as we all know, technology is one of the industries that in many countries around the world, women are still seriously underrepresented in. And although the same might be said of a number of other industries, engineering, finance, a number of other sciences, for instance, where women are still also underrepresented, given that technology has such an important and increasingly important role, not only in our economies, and in our work environment, but also in our daily lives and our societies, we recognize that it's really, really crucial for women to be represented better in the technology industry. Because as we know of lessons learned from other industries, if you're not part of the process of the development of new platforms or new forums, there's a huge chance that the outcomes of those new industries might not address your needs. So it's very, very important for women to have a place at the table and be part of the conversation. So for our panel today, we've invited three of our speakers who are women who have a seat at the table and who are part of the conversation. of driving the technology industry forward, and of course, women's representation in the technology industry forward too. So I thought it would be great if we can hand over to our panelists to introduce themselves. And I'm going to go just around the virtual room as I can see on my screen. So Professor Christina, could you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, it's a pleasure to be here today and welcome everyone that's connecting in. So my name is Christina Statopoulos. I'm originally from the US, but I've been based in Madrid, Spain since 2012, and I'm dedicated to the world of data. So I'm currently working as an analytical consultant at Google, helping some of our largest advertisers implement complex data projects. And on the academic side, I am adjunct faculty at IE Business School, and I'm a guest lecturer at ISDI, both international universities in Madrid. And I've done a lot of speaking tours across Europe, Central Asia, and the Middle East with IE Business School. I'm very much involved in the community. I love women in tech events, so I'm very happy to be here today. And especially now that we're moving all of these events online and having virtual conferences, it's a relief to see initiatives like this continuing to live in the space. So thank you very much, Aruba.
Great, thank you, Christina. It's great to have you on the panel. Dr. Eva?
Yes, welcome everybody. And yes, thank you for inviting me. I'm Eva Marie Müller-Stühler. I'm the Chief Data Scientist for IBM Middle East, Africa, and Turkey, so everything in this region, and also the Advanced Analytics and AI Practice Leader for IBM. So what we basically do is we help our clients implementing large-scale AI projects. Most of them are stuck somewhere in the POC phase. They can't scale, they can't go to full deployment. They don't see the impact that they actually expected from data and AI. So that is where my team comes in and fixes it. It could be in the oil and gas sector, government sector, basically our largest client in EMEA. I'm also a member of the Academy of Technology for IBM. I'm a regular speaker, for example, at the United Nations. I was working with various governments on change management and the impact of AI on society. I'm in the Center of Competence for the IBM Ethics Board, and also on the advisory board for the International Congress of AI Ethics. So this is pretty much what I do in a nutshell. So everything AI in the region, including chatbots, virtual agents, all of that.
Thank you, Dr. Eva. Dr. Huda? I think you're still muted.
Hi, everyone. Thank you very much, Aruba, Sherry, Noura, and Area 2071 for hosting us. Professor Christina and Eva Marie, it's a pleasure to be with you on the panel. My name is Huda Al-Khazemi. I am the Director for Center for Cybersecurity, NYU Abu Dhabi. I'm also Assistant Professor in the Department of Engineering in NYU. I, as well, that's my academic kind of post. And I'm head of an NGO here in UAE, which is Emirates Women Digital Association, Emirates Digital Association for Women, which is a non-for-profit under Ministry of Social Affairs. I work with Arab Women in Computing, which is another non-for-profit that we established on the Arab world and MENA to improve the numbers or the perceived numbers of women in the Arab world, because we have an abundance of them. And I'll talk about this later on. And we as well, I work as well with communities, international communities, with initiatives on increasing the number of women in STEM and improving opportunities, the level of opportunities that would exist for them. So I'm the strategic director for Women in AI here in UAE and the MENA region, and as well for the International Association for Women Scientists and Engineers. So it's a pleasure to be here with everybody else and to tackle this dialogue and this interesting conversation. Looking forward for it.
Dr. Huda, you actually bring me very nicely to the first kind of question that I wanted to put to all of you. for a lot of us who are not in the technology industry, and I know that we have a relatively diverse kind of range of view across the technology industry with data, AI, and cybersecurity. It can be very intimidating for a non-technical person or like outside the technology industry. Like, oh my God, I can't imagine what a job in the technology industry would be. I mean, I'm not a maths genius, or I wasn't like a straight A student. But I think that might be like a huge just barrier for girls, women, but even just people in general when they perceive jobs in the technology industry. So I'd like to just ask all of you, what would a day in your job look like? What is your main kind of aim and objective that you seek to fulfill in your different roles? Maybe we can start with you, Professor Christina.
Yeah, so my responsibility at Google is not team management, it's rather project management. I help our top advertising clients, international clients, implement complex data projects, optimization, automation. So pretty much I use data, both internal and external data, as well as data visualizations and automated reporting and insights to help our clients drive business decisions. So it can be decisions about marketing, about expansion into new markets, or product launches. So I try to find ways to deliver automated insights and strategies to guide their business and to ultimately help them reach their maximum potential as companies. So a typical day involves a lot of cross-functional team meetings to get projects off the ground, and then mixed with a lot of time in project development on my own. So that could be literally programming or creating dashboards or elaborating on insights that I'm finding within the data and presenting them.
So using like data-driven insights to inform the strategy or inform business decisions.
Exactly, yeah.
And Dr. Eva, so you mentioned in your introduction that you do a lot of work across AI, the implementation of AI and ethics. So what would a day in your role look like?
A lot of phone calls and Zoom meetings or WebEx actually for us. So I'm responsible for building the practice in advanced analytics and AI, and that is various things. So first of all, I'm responsible for my team, which means upskilling, reskilling, helping them, coaching them on their career, making sure they are employed on projects. And then it is setting up the projects with our clients, scoping them, helping them, getting the people there, and supervising the development of the and the delivery of the project is another big topic. And then I'm very close to IBM Research and the Academy of Technology, where we set the overall vision for IBM. So that means basically setting up projects where we decide what are future trends and technologies, or how do they actually look like for EMEA, and really shaping our offerings, saying this worked, this didn't work, this is a great idea, how can we push that forward to the client? So, and then the whole ethics sides where we work together and say, okay, how can we actually bring AI ethic as a tangible product to our clients? And how do we make that work?
Okay, and Dr. Hada?
Okay, so I come from 12 years of industry. So I led teams in the past on multiple projects that are related primarily on R&D, research and development, specifically in the field of cybersecurity. And this is the extension of the work that I do with the Center for Cybersecurity here in NYU Abu Dhabi, where we try to tackle different aspects and projects that are related to cybersecurity. Since the field is interdisciplinary, that's a good news for you, Aruba. You don't have to be genius at math, and you don't have to be, cutting edge kind of a scientist into the field to do good on cybersecurity or to do good in other fields, I would say AI and data science. You just have to have the passion and the willingness to contribute most of the time, because we measure people not by their IQ, but by their contributions and the value of their contributions. So we work on interdisciplinary projects. For example, cryptography. My field is in cryptography, so I work on cryptography, cryptanalysis. I do as well avionics security. I have projects that we work on big data security. And we have a few projects that are related to self-driving cars or like autonomous car security, autonomous system security. These systems have an abundance of analytics going on the platform. So we're trying to introduce some kind of adversarial learning, into the equation to measure the level of security that exists within these platforms. So this is with my research aspects in the center. I do also manage the operational aspects in the center. We have a great group of researchers and scientists and professors who lead their own subgroups in a very autonomous way and in a very efficient way, I would say, and makes our life easy. So that's it in a nutshell. I'll consult as well on other technology projects outside of my directorship capacity in the center or professorship capacity. So that's mostly it.
Thank you, Dr. Hida. So it's really helpful to understand that almost like all of you have obviously an entirely technology kind of focused role, but with a lot of overlapping sort of work with other areas such as business or ethical questions or regulatory issues. So of course you don't just, or we can't imagine technology as just an industry by itself, which is kind of like gate kept by people who work in the technology industry, but the fact that the industry has to be very interlinked with business, with research, with ethics, with all of the other kind of parts of the ecosystem. So with that kind of as a background, and the fact that we have a relatively sort of international panel with us, how do you feel that your role or the industry differs in different parts of the world? Since Dr. Huda, you're obviously based in the region, and Dr. Eva or Christina, you've been across Europe and in the US. What are the main differences that you see across regions in the kind of use and application of technology in your different respective fields? Christina, if I can start with you again.
Yes, sure. So I don't know about level of maturity. It really can vary, at least in my field when we're talking about data, big data. It can vary between regions, between countries, but even in my experience, because I've worked specifically a lot in Europe, but I have traveled to do speaking tours in the Middle East and Central Asia. So I've had a lot of one-to-ones and discussions with people working in very different regions. And I've normally been surprised at how much they've been working on. I would go to maybe places that I wouldn't have thought that would be so developed, and yet they are. There's a lot of work being done. So what I'm seeing is that regions far and wide are very much aware that data is like the most valuable asset right now, and we need to be getting the most value that we can from it. So as far as maturity, it does vary between regions, but everyone seems to be aware that they need to take advantage of this asset and put it to use.
Do you feel like more than maturity in between regions, it's almost maturity at like a firm level or entity level might differ? So even within the same region, it could be that different entities are always at a different level of maturity. Because the technology feel like it's connected, it's not necessarily kind of pinned down to a geographic location.
That's for sure. It varies a lot between companies. And of course, anyone working directly in tech, the big tech or even just startups are very much ahead of more traditional businesses. So if we can compare it to maybe banking and finance or I don't even know, some cases of retail, there are companies that are getting left behind. And then many times they're being pushed out of the space by more innovative ideas and startups, like we've all seen happening with, Kareem and Amazon pushing into the retail space when nobody expected it. So it does vary completely between between companies, but as far as between regions, I'm seeing more, more aligned between regions and less so between companies.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Dr. Eva, in your experience, what is the kind of main differences you see in technology adoption across regions? Or like Christina pointed out, it's not about a regional difference, it's about entity level or firm level differences.
So about 10 years ago, actually 50, in different phases, I would say different countries were heading it. And there are different ways of approaching it. So 10 years ago, we were really leading Europe from London, while Germany was still very much behind. And the conversations Germany was having is like, so this data, is it like electricity that comes out of the plug? And and question like, ooh, I don't even know how to answer this question. It's an interesting idea. But so it is, I think, then, and that was one of the head of analytics from one of the world's biggest insurance companies. And I was at that time completely surprised that he would not see the value of data and not see value. But different companies had their own speed and their own learning curves of catching up. I think every region that I travel in the world and where I do data science projects, every client, they beat themselves up the most. I have never seen a client who said, oh, we have great data. Most of them say, yeah, we're like so much worse than everyone else. I spoke to the data science community in Kenya on Sunday, and they were like, yeah, but we in Kenya, we are like really bad in our data quality. And I was like, no, guys, actually, every country is bad in data quality. It really depends on which company you're talking to. So, and it's just everyone has their own speed. I think one thing that I did see is the overall emphasis on pet projects, on let's see what the competition is doing, and not enough of like what is actually my business model and what is my purpose. I didn't see enough companies setting up a strategy. They would not run their marketing or their sales team without a strategy, but for example, for some reason they decided data science is something done by a nerdy guy in the basement without any business understanding, and here's some data and do your POCs, and that is, I think, something that is slowly changing, and you see companies becoming more mature and saying, okay, what have we been doing wrong? What is actually ML ops? How do we actually get to full deployment and impact? So it is, I wouldn't say there's one region that is more advanced. There are companies that are more advanced.
Yeah, I would echo that as well, Aruba. I think I would echo what Professor Christina and Eva Marie just said. It's not about a specific region. It's more about the impact that you could create out there within the technology sector or within. For me, I worked in R&D inside and outside UAE. I worked in France and Denmark and Belgium, Singapore, Japan. And what I noticed is we have these preconceived ideas and preconceived models. But when we get into the reality, when we see the reality of the situation, we tend to, I think, devalue our original positioning when we get into certain R&D area. And for me, I assumed that we in UAE within the R&D sector, we are a bit behind from other, from other regions around the world, because you tend to value this contribution by the number of outputs that are out there in R&Ds between the different regions and the value of these contributions. But what I discovered actually that in UAE, you do have more opportunities to work in less of segregated environment. So you have less silos being involved when you are developing a technology, which is very beneficial when you are introducing a diverse concept. So you tend to have this 360 view of one technology, address blind sites, especially in the field of cybersecurity, for example. I mean, our team is being called into different projects that are starting from what I said on driverless cars, for example. or like self-driving cars and autonomous cars, and being put there on the evaluation of the technology that's being built when RTA, for example, initiated their World Challenge. And we discovered that safety has been put as a metric, but security was not put as a metric. So we developed a benchmark that is considered, I would say, a global benchmark on how technology, when built at that level, should have security in mind as a requirement, and put a series of requirements and policies. We helped people level up the technology that they were building. And I would say this is a great contribution to this industry. And together, if we worked, it's like UAE is a melting pot of 120 nationalities. And this kind of also, it brings diverse concepts, 120 plus nationalities, because I don't know what's the final figure. It brings in this kind of diverse concepts from institutional memories that you're bringing from your past experiences. And this is advantageous. We should use that. We should use this melting pot of information to build the new technology and work less in silos. Because I think when I noticed when you are in Europe, for example, you wouldn't hear about specific projects unless you have a direct connection within that project. In UAE, it's very easy for you to tap into an opportunity within technology projects, get invited, or offer your help and services to be included within that kind of atmosphere or environment.
So definitely there can be sort of misconceptions about how the technology industry, for instance, is doing across different regions, and maybe even within regions and across different countries. With respect to women in the technology sector, however, how do you feel that your experiences in different regions or in general in the field compared to other kind of your co-workers that might be in different parts of the business? How do you feel women's representation or women's involvement in different parts of your business or parts of the company you work in is? For instance, like, do you often feel like the data science team is completely skewed towards men, whereas the finance team is skewed towards women? Or is it different in different offices? Like your office is different to your US office, it's different to your Middle East office.
I could go first, I think. I mean, coming from UAE, I did not see that kind of variation or that kind of disconnect when it comes to the number of women in specific fields. I came from, because we have segregated education, the majority of 100% of my schooling system were women up to the university level. So, and I remember in university, we were like double the size in the female classes, we were double the size of the male class. And in the engineering, in the engineering discipline. And I always knew that, for example, the data that we all know in UAE, 77% of the applicants to higher education are women. We know that 70% of these graduates are women, and they're mostly in STEM fields, and 56%, for example. We know that in UAE we have when it comes to the parliament, for example, or the federal council, the National Federal Council, it's a 50-50 representation for women. It's a call for 50-50 representation of women, and there is a presidential decree for it to be that. And 32% of the cabinets in UAE are women. When it comes to investment on the Arab world, for example, 23% of these 100 top investors are women from UAE. And I think I've read on one of the national platforms that we have over 50% of women in business with a net value of collective net value of 50 billion dirhams plus. So we see them around moving, and I don't see a restriction. I did not see at all a restriction to the fact that my gender played a view in the opportunities I got in UAE, or I got a scholarship to do my master's degree in France. And once I got to that level, to that kind of westernized, box, I noticed the difference because out of my UAE cohort, for example, we were 50-50 representations of males and females within the scholarship program. But walking into a diverse class in France, for example, you notice that I did my master's in mathematics and cryptology and engineering. And so when I walk into the class, there are like maybe two ladies only in the class, two French ladies in the class. I was like, this is strange. But I did not really ring a strong bell to me until I did my PhD in Denmark. And people in the statistics department, for example, mostly were women. And I was in department of mathematics and section of cryptology. And I would have my fellow female researchers asking me, why are you the only woman in that department? Which was strange to me at the moment. We started with 3 women in the department, I think, and upon towards my graduation, it was only 1 woman. I work currently in an American as well platform in an American institution, NYU Abu Dhabi is UAE American institution, and I see as well this kind of gender, I would say, imbalances when it comes to putting women into, because I walked into the university and I think I was one of the first 2 females hired in Department of Engineering in the university that was established in the region for 10 years. And that was for me a very strange positioning to see. At the same time, I mean, the leadership of the university at that point of time did not have any women. And to me, again, it's strange because I come from an industry for 12 years where I walk in my black abaya and I have a team of ladies analysts walking in their black abayas and like a board of a director where they're all white and we talk and where our point of views are well respected, needed and asked for. And we've never been, evaluated based on gender. We've been evaluated based on skills. So to walk into that kind of a different narrative was a bit of a strange because I think, and this is the struggle in UAE. UAE is a melting pot again for international business, not only a local business. So from my local perspective, I see that we have a huge a huge backing from the government, from the cultural aspects itself. To be there, to go out there, because women are not expected to stay at home and just take care of children here. They're expected to be out there producing partners in the community if they chose to be in that kind of capacity. And to be contributing in STEM and to be contributing, they're expected to be doctors and engineers and lawyers and ministers. And these are the normal stereotypes. And when you walk into an international community, and I've been in a lot of Eva Marie UN meetings where we talk about gender balance. And in that table, I'm the only woman, and the only other woman is the secretary writing the minutes of meetings. So I keep telling people when this happens is like, sorry, you need to change this narrative. You need to have among your collaborators a woman that's not only doing secretarial jobs, but doing, I'm not like belittling the secretarial jobs. They're very important in keeping up the logistics of the work. But you need also to improve the numbers that you have on people carrying out the responsibilities and dialogues around the table. So I think we're lucky to be part of this ecosystem. I don't know if you know, like we have a law and regulation that's also advantageous here in this country. It's an environment that have a faster reaction to remove challenges, either regulation challenges or laws challenges, especially when it comes to data privacy, women laws, for example. We have a law that says it's illegal to pay women different than you pay men in the private and the public sector. So I don't know if there is any country in the world that has that. So, I mean, we're lucky enough to just to be existing in this ecosystem, and we're supposed to make the best out of it.
I very much agree with you, Dr. Huda. It is exactly my experience in Germany as well. When I studied mathematics, we were less than 5% women. And the joke was always on the boys, like, oh yeah, we have some women, but they don't look like women. I was like, I'm sorry, I'm not here for my looks. I'm here for my brain. And who are you to judge? And it was so often, it's actually, there's so many stories of like, I remember when I was going to my exams, I was told by my parents, like, okay, if you have oral exams, you have to look nice, dress up, because you have to show it's something really important, an important step in your university career. So at the beginning, I was like putting on a little bit of makeup and trying the best to look like I value the event. And I got the most brutal questions. The moment I started to, and I was wondering, why are the boys are getting so much nicer questions and I'm getting the most challenging? So the moment I started dressing like the boys, wearing trainers, not washing my hair before the exams, wearing my glasses, wearing gray colors that clashes, and the moment that changes and I got easy questions like, why, how can it be that on a technical university I'm still judged by my looks? And even in the career ladder, I think a lot of women are dropping out of technical jobs as well, because they're constantly not promoted, or there's so much criticism that I have heard in my career. I think I had so many guys who had a business background saying, oh yeah, but Eva is not technical. Well, you kind of like, I'm sorry, but you're not even qualified to judge. It's the criticism you get, especially in Europe, is extreme. And I think the higher you get in your career, the less you're seen as a technical person. So even some of my female colleagues said the funniest thing that happened, the more senior they get, the more people thought they're not technical. And I think that is something where we really have to change. We have to change the ladder of how we see women in technical jobs.
Yeah.
But as the difference is, it's funny because in Germany people go like, how can you live in the Middle East? Do you have to cover up? And I'm sure you're not allowed to speak in meetings. And you're like, no, I'm sorry, I do have a voice. I am allowed to speak in meetings, and I'm actually very well respected. The other thing that I often see is when companies report numbers of how many women they have in technical companies, for example, they calculate everybody. They take all the women in HR, all the women in marketing, and so on, and they go like, hey, we are fine, we have 40% women. But then when you actually drill down and say, okay, but how many of your women are in technical positions? They're less than 10%. And it's, yeah, many companies out there, and you kind of feel like, I'm sorry, but you do have to make sure that your women in tech positions, in tech leadership positions, are also 50%.
Yeah.
First of all, I'm super impressed by the numbers in UAE, and I can vouch for this gender inequality that I feel working in Europe. And I was going to say exactly what you just said, Dr. Eva, because on the surface it does look like a lot of these tech companies have equality, because like you said, 40%, 45% are women, but you need to dive into the data. You need to go to a deeper level, because from in my experience in Europe and the US, what I've seen is if you start looking at the numbers, the engineering team, the analyst team, look at the technical roles, because I can promise you that 40, 45%, even 50% representation of women is practically non-existent. And in many cases, you will have just a couple of women represented on these technical teams, and very much outweighed by male presence, 90%. And not just in the workplace, but we see it reflected. I see it reflected a lot because of traveling and going to conferences. I will notice many times as well this imbalance of male and female speakers. You'll see the same thing, that you'll go to technical events and it will be 90% of the speakers are men, 10% are female. And I see this repeatedly. I see it all the time. But that's just speaking from my experience in Europe and the US. But it's definitely alive and well, this imbalance.
I see that all the time, all male panels, and you're kind of like, really, you didn't find single women?
Yeah.
It's a really funny thing that you've brought this up, because we have the same push internally whenever we have discussions, that we're pushed to have more women in our panels, and we always, almost being women, we sometimes push back saying, no, but we want to have the most qualified people, or the most interesting profiles, not just one on a panel or just in a conference because they're a woman. So I think the real push is, like what you pointed out, is to get women into technical positions and into leadership positions. So not just women for the sake of filling. Yeah.
Most of the guys are on the panel because they're boys. I think that is something we have to keep in mind. They're not there because they are the most qualified. We don't have 99% of the men being more qualified than women, but we have 99% of the men being conference speakers and on panels. So that for me shows they're there because they're male and they have no issue at all with sitting there because they're white, middle-aged men. So why should the one woman in a decade that sits there because she's female is not an issue for all of the women? I normally, when I see women in leadership position or on panels or speaking, they're normally, absolute outperforming everyone else there.
Definitely. I think we must have all heard of different studies and kind of tests done that if a pilot announces before the takeoff of a flight that the pilot is a female, there's less confidence in the passengers that the plane is being operated by a female pilot as opposed to a male pilot. So there's like not necessarily based on performance, but just based on a perception that.
I don't know if we can generalize that statement. For me, I feel extremely happy if I know the pilot is a woman.
Yeah, because you trained twice as hard.
Yeah. And I happen to fly a lot, like with women pilots, especially from UAE, like a couple of times, more than a couple of times. I flew on Emirates, and this is just shout out to Emirates because they're working very hard on making sure that they have also a balanced female pilots in the team. Shout out to Captain Huda. There is one that's called Huda, I know very sure. And we have Captain Al Maktoum as well, who was part of the ladies on the team. And we have many other scenarios. I feel safe when I know that the skilled person is handling the craft. So that's what matters.
And it's funny that we're speaking about airlines because I have an interesting story related to this, because I boarded a plane and there was a female and a male pilot, and I'm the same. I'm very happy when I see a female pilot in a profession that in the past was considered very male, when it should be, of course, 50-50. So I was on this airplane, and while I think I was coming back from like Bucharest, and when we were landing back in Madrid, the airplane hit a bit of turbulence. And there was a woman behind me who commented and said, "Oh, it must be the female pilot driving right now." And I was really angry because not only they were making this assumption, these horrible biases, but it was a female that made the comment. So it's one point that I wanted to just throw out there, that we also need to be very supportive between each other as females, and a comment like that should never ever be said.
Yeah, that's a really interesting, unfortunate but interesting story, because studies do show that a lot of women are often the most harshest critics of rating other women or ranking other women in different kind of indices and things. So over your experience over the past in different regions, but over your career, have you seen any change? So it seems that in a lot of positions or in places, men are still possibly kind of the dominated gender that's represented. But have you seen any change? Is there a shift? Are things getting better, or are they just stagnant, or maybe getting worse in some places?
I'm very pessimistic on that, if I'm really honest. So considering that the first programmers were female, coding and computer science is actually by when it was invented, a female subject. We had Ada Lovelace as the first female coder, but during the Second World War, all the coders, all the cryptologists and so on, they were all female, massive female teams. But it completely went into a male job. And I actually think the impact of social media nowadays is making this the small change that we had in the past, it's really putting that at risk. If you Google, for example, nurse, you find women. If you Google car mechanic, you find men. If you Google programmer, and all this machine learning only emphasizes the current status. So Ruth Bader Ginsburg was once asked, when do we have enough women on the Supreme Court? And she said, when there's 9 out of 9. And when people are like, what? That is not equal. She said, but we had 9 out of 9 men for decades. using AI and machine learning algorithms, you will never hit the 9 out of 9. You will always emphasize the current status. The machine learning algorithms are actually doing what has always been the thing. They're trained on the past. So change in society will become more and more less likely, actually. We have a technologies change, we have adoption of things, but we don't have a real thinking like, oh yeah, women should be in tech. I think that will, I see that very negatively, if I'm really honest. And the other thing with social media is that young women and girls getting more and more emphasized on looking like the Kardashians, on being skinny, on doing selfies, and less on do your homework, study science, find out why things work a certain way. So this is something that is not there where it used to be in the past. When I said to my parents, oh, I was at school and the boy said I can't become a rocket pilot, they were like, why not? Of course you can. Or when they said I want to become a scientist or a neurobiologist, my parents would say, yeah, of course you can do that. But nowadays, when you Google it, you only find the men that are already having the jobs, and your parents don't really have the chance to see that bias and push you in the right direction again.
So I think it's a pretty obvious that maybe Christina and Eva Marie, you are within the data science community and you are also within the analytics community. We need to make sure that people who are building this technology, they need to be building a mindful technology. I mean, you can't just build a search engine based on a random, randomized algorithm that would push certain data analytics upon a search. I think, again, we don't want to build biases towards our own causes and cases, but we need to also make sure that our data set is well represented. It's not just biased to the white male kind of data points, rather than just have a great representation of the 7 billion people living in this world. And that's very important, I think. And again, I would say I don't have an issue existing in a male community or male society if the males within this society or community were empowering women. Were like not empowering. I don't think women needs empowerment. They could seek their own routes and build their own solutions, but they weren't just diminishing the opportunities that could exist for women. And again, I just don't want to repeat the things. I mean, like people who are responsible about the gender bias council here in UAE, they are also males, and they are advocating for changes in laws for women. They're advocating for building accelerators for women on all levels, not only on the high tech level, on the scholarships level, on technology sectors, even women who are left behind, like because UAE is 40 years old country, women who don't have that kind of technical skill set to compete in a technical sector, they're trying to provide opportunities for them to compete in an economic sector where their skill set is important. And I think that's what we need to be focused on, building opportunities that would exist and would matter in different contexts and different narratives.
I teach about this in my courses at IE, actually, because exactly like Dr. Eva said, data and all these algorithms around us are exacerbating inequality. It's just repeating what we've been doing for years, and we need to somehow proactively fight against that. So it for sure exists. And one thing that I always recommend people, there's 2 books that I've read that talk about this, and it helps to have awareness of what exactly is going on. There's one called Weapons of Math Destruction. Again, about a very interesting title, but again, about the destruction that these algorithms can do for us. And the second one is a book that I'm reading now. I actually brought it here in case I was going to have a chance to speak about it. But it's called Invisible Women. It's here. It's called Invisible Women, Exposing Data Bias in a World Designed for Men. So if you read and you start to research this topic, it will really surprise you how much inequality there is, and how these algorithms are making it worse. Thank you, Dr. Oda, for sharing the link. This Weapons of Math Destruction and the other one I just mentioned are amazing
They
books
are
on the
really
subject.
amazing books, yeah.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people who don't have the kind of background in this field don't realize actually the kind of stereotypes that might be perpetuated by search engine functions, for instance, or by data algorithms, just perpetuating the bias that it might already be there in the data, or might be there in the person who's kind of reading the data too. So that's a really good
Or
point.
even just in sampling the data.
Or just in some.
Yeah. One of the examples they give in Invisible Women is that the room temperature was set in the 70s by asking people in the office, and they asked 99% men. And that's a room temperature people think is comfortable, but it's not comfortable for women.
Yeah,
And
biologically, men feel like they need to have a cooler temperature than women. That's why you always see women wearing like coats and jumpers when they're in the office. I think there's also an example of the airbags being tested in a car crash were designed for bigger bodies because they didn't have women in the testing vehicle.
Yeah, and all the medicine and so on. And that's why it's so important to have women in technical roles. And because you run a massive business risk by having not diverse teams. The solutions you will develop will only suit white males. When Siri came out, it didn't react to female voices as good as it reacted to male voices. Image recognition only worked for white men at the beginning. There are a million of cases out there where you build solutions that you only test on one person. And if that comes out onto the market and people will pick up on it, customers are more and more becoming aware of social responsibility and want to deal with ethical companies. So if you as a business are in the news for not being ethical, for doing the wrong thing, it will melt away your business value faster than you can change it. So being ethical and having the diverse team where somebody might speak up and say, I'm sorry, this doesn't work for me. Why not? That is the best way you can do to protect yourself as a company.
Thank you. So just in the interest of time, because we're in our last 5-6 minutes, I just want to ask you a closing question before we can take some questions from the audience in the chat. What piece of advice would you give for inspiring the next generation of women? If you were talking to yourself 10 years ago, or just speaking to your younger colleagues, like what kind of advice would you give them?
I would say personally, don't settle and don't be intimidated of new experiences, especially if there are technical experiences. Get into that project that you wanted to get into. Don't wait for people to hand you over opportunities. Put yourself forward, reach out to the network, use different pathways, but don't settle for being excellent at what you do, being well qualified and skilled, having the best degrees, and people would just hand you over opportunities. No, build your own opportunities. And if the people in the status quo, in the ecosystem, did not give you the level of support that you need, then build your own ecosystem. Get in your champions around you and build that opportunity, because you might be that tech startup that would support more women in the future, or you would be that tech project that would support more women in the future. And if you don't do it yourself, then we have to wait for extra 5 years or extra 10 years for someone to do it. And I think it takes a tribe to change status quos, and it takes everyone. And when building a project for women, it's not just about women, it's about the community. And that's what I discovered. It's not only about just building the best opportunities for women, but building the best opportunities for children, changing curriculums, changing the ways we perceive how technology is supposed to be built. Because I discovered all of these many inequalities going forward. Why would a video game is supposed to be built by an adult for children? Why not children design their own video games? why a person who is a head of a startup is supposed to be someone who is above 18? Why can't we empower children as well to have these opportunities? And males equally. I mean, like, we are here to change the perception of opportunity and to do it together and make sure that we don't leave anyone behind. Yeah.
Building off of that, there's a quote that says, if somebody offers you an amazing opportunity, but you're not sure you can do it, say yes, then learn how to do it later. And that's one that I live by, and I encourage others as well. Walk into rooms with confidence, get your voice heard, and take opportunities. There's a statistic that says that that I think men apply to jobs when they fulfill like 30% or 40% of the requirements, whereas women wait until they have fulfilled 90 to 100% of the requirements, or they won't even put themselves out there. So take every chance you get, because you don't know if you're going to get it again. And it doesn't hurt to just try. And then one other piece of advice would be to try to get a mentor. Try to get someone that you can connect with and talk to guide you as you develop your career in tech.
Yeah, I completely agree with both of the advices. I think so. Yeah, being technical and knowing what you know, and having the confidence to make yourself heard is really important. I know I see so often men speaking out when they have no idea and they just get away with it. Speak out if you think that the other person doesn't know what they're talking about, and talk what you think is right. So have the confidence on saying, no, this is what it looks like. This is correct. This is a technical approach to it. Don't be intimidated. And the other two, yeah, they're absolutely spot on. Jump at opportunities. You own your own career. Nobody will come to you and baby feed you step by step up the career ladder. Make a clear plan what you want to achieve, and then communicate it to your leaders and say, I want A, B, C, D. How do I get there? And then your leaders will be more than happy to support you. And the network is another really important thing. For me, the women networks that I have are actually so much stronger and so much more valuable than the men network. The women networks always deliver. When I don't just have a mentor, I actually have a complete team either on team coaching, on technical questions, on everything that comes along, on the governmental network. And basically taking them all together and saying, having strong women in these networks, that is something that has really made a difference.
Thank you, Dr. Eva. Unfortunately, we are right at the end of our time, so I think I'd like to close the session by thanking our panelists. Thank you so much for taking the time to participate and share your thoughts with us, and being so candid and kind of being clear and straightforward and upfront that maybe the situation isn't as great as we'd like to think, with a huge push to diversity, and giving us some really important pieces of advice on how we can change that. So thank you so much for spending your time on this panel today. And thank you everyone for joining us. Hopefully we will see you at our next Women's Specialist.
Aruba, do we have a minute to take a question from the audience or not?
If you're able to make time, that's absolutely fine, yes.
I know that we have only 3 questions. I think we could tackle them. There is a question that says, what is the advice you have for men active in the tech industry to help them foster a culture where women are empowered to effectively grow? Would anyone want to take a go at this?
I would say for males, for men, and we've talked about it a bit, it's just to educate yourself on the gender gap. It's normal that you haven't lived the situation that women have, but in order to understand it more, do your research, read up on the topic, just so you can be aware of what biases can exist. And as a male leader as well, advocate for changing the environment and for changing company policies. Be an ally and find ways to improve your company culture, interview and hiring processes. And if something is being wrong, speak up. Don't wait for a woman to do it. If you're the first one to notice, advocate for its change as well.
Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah. Have no bias in your team. Try to make it an equal practice that you're running. step down from all male panels and say, sorry, please put in the extra effort and find a woman. Otherwise, I'm not doing it. Be an ally and don't leverage on the inequality that exists.
Okay, and I would say the same. I would say take action. Don't be stuck in advocacy or awareness role. Make an action. If you have a job role and you have both female and male candidates, but you know very well that your numbers within the organization are skewed, take the female candidate and work with her, even if she is perceived at a lower skill set, to build her skill set, because you're doing a service for the community by building a skill set within a female, in the field. And you're also improving the workplace, balance. And these kind of mindful decisions are very important. And I would say go beyond what we have just suggested and think internally, how can you change that? Because sometimes if you build a strategy and you build an action plan behind it, you can achieve these goals, hopefully. We have a second question. Aruba, do you want me to take it? It's just a second question. It's just, what would you advise employees to put on job advertisement to attract female applicants based on what we know about how men are more likely to apply when they don't meet requirements? So this is from Mike Dawson. Thank you, Mike, for your question. So, I mean, in my field, right now, to improve the number of women, we do have specific roles that says preferable for women applicants. I don't support this because at the end, we will create a different gap. But I think it is necessary in some jobs. I mean, in publication, for example, it's a word that's editing these publications around the world, scientific and engineering publications. Most of the editors are actually males, and we want to have female editors to be able to improve the number of publications coming from females around the world. So, I mean, I would support it definitely in an industry where you do have this kind of skewed numbers. I don't know what kind of other advice, Christina or Eva Marie, would you like to?
I think it's a tough. Sorry, I think it's a tough question to address because it's true that it's more like linguistics. The words that appeal to female versus male. It's true that there is a difference. And I don't necessarily support the same thing as you. I don't support that they put that they're only hiring for a female or strongly encouraged. It just needs to be hired the best candidate for the role. The problem is that we need to attract more women to these roles because we're getting that imbalance from the start. But it is tough to tackle. Like how do you make the wording to appeal to women? That's something that's probably its own field of research, to be honest.
Yeah, I actually think that we do have. I'm a big fan of quotas actually, because unless you have quotas, you will not change anything. The press needs to learn that there should be 50-50 quotes of female scientists as of male scientists. We need to be able to get away from the distinction male scientist or female scientist and just be able to say scientist. But we will not be able to do that while a scientist is always seen as male. And so we do need to have quotas. And I think I'm actually even in favor of saying this job is only possible for women, because in the past it was always just men hiring men, and they hired the boys from the same football club. So unless you force them to not stop that, unless you force them to take diversity trainings and be educated and so on, the situation will not improve.
I wish there were a way to do blind interviews like they do with the orchestra. If you've heard about the blind auditions, where back in the 1970s, I think it was, they started to put a blocker so that when people were auditioning for the orchestra, the musicians, they wouldn't be able to see the person. And the diversity, it went from almost pretty much zero women on the New York Harmonic Orchestra to practically 50-50 as soon as they implemented this barrier. But it's not so easy to do something like that in interviews. I just wish it were.
Yeah, and I would say as well, we should be careful of being. We should be careful as well of being stuck at the mentorship level and sponsorship level. Because I mean, it's good to be mentored, but for how long? And it's good to be sponsored, but be careful of the biases and the as well internal you know, internal motivations of your sponsors. I mean, we have so many sponsors in the field that kept women at a certain level of even if it's executive, at a certain executive level, and they limited the growth cycle of these women. So I would be very careful of advocating for mentorship or sponsorship when it comes, because most of what you hear when you go around all of this women in tech or women in whatever panels, they will tell you seek a male sponsorship and a male mentorship. And I would be very careful of that. I would be making sure that you first need to make sure that you are having your own system of breaking into opportunities as well, and not just waiting for your sponsor or mentor to take you there.
Yeah, I actually, and you can't believe how often I heard from men saying, I'm a big supporter of women. I have a wife, I have a daughter, I have a secretary, I have a maid at home. And you kind of like, yeah, and in your team, you do realize that that is just not the point. That is not women in roles.
Anyway, thank you so much again for your closing thoughts. And thank you for your pieces of advice, and hopefully we're going to see some change in the future. So thank you again, and thank you everybody for attending, and hopefully we can see you at our next Women's Majlis session.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, everybody.